Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us in this partner session with the OECD Responsible Sourcing Forum, where we talk about the resourcing project and what we've been doing for the last 2 years. Part of this today's panel is hearing from our researchers, and then the other part is hearing from our partners and advisors and experts who've been involved with our project for the last 3 years. So what are we talking about today? What is the resourcing project? The resourcing project started on the premise of we will not reinvent the wheel when it comes to talking about responsible sourcing and sustainability across mineral value chains. There is so much knowledge and information and standards and toolkits out there that our task was to bring this knowledge together in a standardized format to make it easier for people to understand what is out there, how to use it, and how can we further responsible sourcing practices across mineral value chains. And part of that research we're going to share with you today. So our agenda is twofold. One, we're going to talk about our findings from responsible sourcing in the renewable energy sector, and then we're going to talk about our findings from the responsible sourcing in the mobility sector. This is based on the 3 main pillars of our project, where we've covered renewable energy already. We're looking at mobility at the moment, and electronics is starting out as our third sector. After presentations from our researchers, we are then going to move on to a panel discussion. Now, let's get things started. For housekeeping rules, there is a question and answer window available to you. Please pop questions in there and we'll try and pick them up as we go along. There is also a chat function if you want to share information, knowledge, or just respond to something that you're hearing. Both of those tools are available to you. Right. We are going to start off with our first speaker, who is the fabulous Marie-Therese Krugel. She's an engineer and works at the Montana University. She leads the resourcing project from Montana's side and has been focusing on renewable energy. There's a fabulous roadmap report that she's put out, which you can find on our webpage. And the thing I like about Marie-Therese's approach to sustainable and responsible sourcing is when that engineering brain comes together with the social science brain. And it is that understanding of frameworks and structure and how we understand this, the huge amount of information that is out there. So with further ado, Marie-Therese, I hand over to you for you to share with us information that you've learned about the renewable energy sector.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Masuma. Good morning also from my side, everyone. I hope you can see my presentation and hear me all right. Perfect. Yeah, it's my pleasure to present some of the results from the resourcing project today. And we are going to look at the renewable energy sector in more detail. So in the resourcing project, we focus on the supply chains of wind turbines and solar PV, and the raw materials, copper, rare earth elements, and quartz or silicon, respectively. The supply chain stages we consider are mining and processing, manufacturing and recycling, and also the procurement that connects all these stages. Every sector in the resourcing project follows the same approach or the same process to develop the sectoral roadmaps. So first, we have the state of play report. The state of play report considers the current situation of the sector. So the challenges and issues for sustainability in the supply chains, key actors, regulations, standards, and initiatives that are currently out there. The next step is then the roadmap workshop, where we define issues that the roadmap needs to address. Then we investigate good practice cases, or as we call them, flagship cases. Those are good practices that address one of the issues that we identified in the state of play report and provide recommendations how this issue can be addressed. The final step in this development process is an extensive consultation process where we involve actors from diverse actor groups from diverse regions all over the world. And together with these stakeholders, with these actors, we define concrete recommendations that are then presented in the final output for each sector, the roadmap, and the good practice guidance document. But today we are going to look at the flagship cases in a bit more detail. So as I've already mentioned, the flagship cases are good practice cases that can sort of serve as a role model for peers, provide guidance, and enable peer learning to really drive the implementation of responsible sourcing. The cases are actor specific, or actor group specific, I should say, actually. So we have cases for policymakers and industry so far, but the cases are not specific for the sector necessarily. So for example, the case of the consultation process for the new Chilean mining policy can be applied to other sectors as well. I would like to introduce one of those cases now, and this is a case of supplier management and audits from the chemical industry. It's the initiative by Together for Sustainability. Again, providing recommendations that can also be used for other sectors as well. So as you know, there are increasing calls for evidence on responsible sourcing practices. But due to the complex nature of the supply chains, it is not enough to simply focus on the lead firm. This would provide a rather incomplete picture. So we really need to look at the entire supply network. And as you can imagine, this is not only a challenge for the lead firm, for the customer, but also for the suppliers, as they receive various requirements from different customers. And sometimes they just don't have the resources to cover the increasing demand for certifications, for reports, and so on. So the approach by Together for Sustainability, or TFS, is to collectively agree on responsible sourcing practices to be addressed, formulate an approach, and conduct the assessments on behalf of all parties involved. So the good practice aspect number one is TFS provides a platform or a database where all the information is pooled, and each member has access to this information and can access each supplier that has already been assessed, can access the results of the audits and assessments and so on. And this already leads me to good practice aspect number two. Since Together for Sustainability is using a standardized framework for their assessments and audits, every member knows exactly what the results mean. There's also a collaborative approach embedded in the TFS approach. So after the assessment or audit is conducted, they share the results with the suppliers first and develop a corrective action plan, or CAP. This action plan is then discussed, and afterwards the final report is prepared and uploaded to the database. So the main impacts from TFS are really the reduction of the administrative burden and the reduction of the resource use for both the customer and the suppliers. Between 2011 and 2020, TFS has conducted 16,000 assessments and 751 audits. It has 31 members from the chemical industry, with a turnover of 365 billion euros. The audits and assessments cover firms from Europe, from Japan, from China, from India, the US, and Brazil. Now, where does this fit into the roadmap? You can see here the 5 overarching targets we have defined for the roadmap for the renewable energy sector. And TFS, of course, certainly fits into the responsible procurement target. The case itself here is relevant for silicon, but as I said already, they also provide a blueprint for the other raw materials as well. But it also really supports the other targets. I mean, looking at social sustainability or environmental sustainability, PFS supports the achievement of that simply by making the supply chains more sustainable in general. To conclude, I just want to point out that you can find all the documents I've mentioned on our homepage. And in the future, there will also be an interactive roadmap tool that will take you through the sectoral roadmaps. Thank you very much. With that, I hand back over to you, Masuma.
Thank you, Marie-Therese. What I found interesting is that a year's research you tried to condense in 5 slides. Well done on that. There is a particular sectors page related to renewable energy where you can find all these case studies, details on the roadmap, the vision, etc. Now, following the renewable energy case is the mobility sector, and Stephanie de Grief is leading that. Stephanie is from UGO and specializes in transport, and she is the deputy head, Division for Resources and Transport at UGO Institute in Germany. Her focus has been on special metals like lithium or rare earth specialities, and she is also leading the research on the mobility sector for the resourcing project. And today she's going to be discussing some of the flagship cases that we have been looking at within e-mobility. Stephanie, on to you.
Thank you very much, Masuma, and also welcome from my side. I will really give a short overview on the mobility sector and 2 of our good practice examples we have identified in our project's work. So what is the scope of the mobility sector? The mobility sector itself is very broad, so from railways, navigation, aviation to road transportation. And we have agreed on looking at the road transportation. And here we have the aim of developing this roadmap until 2050. We have agreed on lithium-ion batteries to look at, because this technology is today the most promising technology to really have this transition to the new transportation and to achieve the Paris Agreement. In the value chain, we will look at mining step, the cell production step, and the OEMs, as well as the recycling step. And we will look at 4 lithium-ion battery materials: lithium, cobalt, nickel, and graphite, and here on natural graphite, as well as on synthetical graphite. Marie-Therese already explained the approach of the work in the different sectors, and here just a really short overview what we have done so far and what are the next steps. So last year we have published our state of play report in April. Then we have organized this roadmap workshop for the brainstorming what should be included in the roadmap. Then we have identified our 4 flagship cases and have organized the flagship lab in March. And now we are in the consultation process of our roadmap development. And I will really invite you to register on the website to 2 of our next webinars on the 24th of May and 7th of June to get in touch with you and discuss our ideas of the roadmap until 2050. And in parallel, we are now also developing the good practice guidance document, which will be published until the end of this month. So, but today I would like to focus on 2 issues from the industry perspective. So 2 of our good flagship cases. One is on responsible procurement, and here how purchasing companies can identify a strong standard in mining. What is a strong standard, and how can a strong standard be implemented in a large firm? And the other one is on circular economy and recycling, and how, especially for lithium-ion batteries, how can a circular economy for batteries be implemented in a company? So let's start with the first one. There is a vast number of different guidelines, certification schemes and standards in the mining sector with different foci. And I think it's very difficult to find an appropriate standard for an industry and also to find a strong standard. So I think the need for producing or purchasing companies is to find a standard that covers almost all materials needed, covers all pillars of sustainability, not only social or environmental, to really cover all pillars of sustainability, and here also to include the mining impacted communities to have this engagement and the SLO. then to have an improvement approach, so not only fail and pass, to have this aim of an improvement of a site. And also, I think that's one main issue of a strong standard, a standard that is accepted by different actors, including NGO and CSO. And what's here also included is to ensure transparency. And here we have identified our good flagship case. It's a combination of IRMA and BMW Group. It's responsible procurement of minerals by using a strong standard, and why IRMA is a strong standard, and how purchasing companies can join, and changing the impact and by adjusting the supplier's contract. And when I would give a really short introduction of IRMA, and I'm very happy that Rebecca is with us today to give you more insights. So what is a strong standard? And for us, it's really the comprehensive global standard, and it covers all industrial mined materials except of the energy fuels. It includes all 3 pillars of sustainability, so social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and business integrity and planning for positive legacies. A standard that is governed equitably by a diverse set of stakeholders, not only industry side, it's also including NGOs and mining impacted communities and labor. I think that's also one main issue in this for a strong standard. To have a decision-making process is based on consensus. So all the stakeholder groups have to find a consensus while setting the criteria. So support is required from all sectors, and no single organization, for example, a company or industry side, has the authority to make a decision. And so it needs to be all supported by all stakeholder groups. And it's gone through a large public consultation process. So there were multiple drafts. They received a lot of feedback to improve the standard, and also had field tests. And it's great that the first audited sites are now there. And then IRMA has also this step-by-step improvement approach. So not only to say, okay, you have it or not, pass or fail, to have this aim for improvement in time. IRMA also uses independent audits. So there are independent auditors. Of course, desk review is included, but also on-site visits. So the auditors go to the sites. The certification is site-specific, and they go there and really have the stakeholder engagement to get in touch with the communities, with the NGOs at the site, and to the mine workers. And last but not least, that the audits are all fully published on the website of from IRMA, and so everyone can have a look and review it. And I think this broad set of criteria brings IRMA to be a strong standard, which is also accepted by NGOs and CSO. Yeah, thanks for Rebecca to give more insights later on here. But we had a combination in our flagship case. So it's not only the strong standard itself, but it's also to how can this be implemented in a large firm. So for example, automobile industry is also it's sometimes criticized for not paying sufficient attention to environmental and social challenges in the battery production for this transformation. And so companies like BMW, but also Daimler, Ford, General Motors, and others are joining IRMA, and they're publicly expressing their aim to really source raw materials from assessed mines. So there's the chance to really include the request for IRMA certification in their suppliers' contracts, and also to support and promote IRMA with formal letters to invite raw material producers in the supply chain to undergo the IRMA certification, so that it's more known and the importance. And this leads to procurement division that has concrete specification for the purchasing of selected raw materials. So of course, and this is quite new standard that not all the materials are available with IRMA certification, but for selected raw materials, to ensure there's responsible procurement by using this certified products, and also for the consumer-facing brands, such as the car companies, that IRMA allows a high level of really transparency into the operation itself. So the company itself really have a better understanding of the current practices, and they know what changes are needed. And also these large firms can use their market leverage to encourage the mines to be audited. And I think that's our main aim from all of us, to really improve the practices overall. And then I would like to give a really short introduction of the other good practice examples we have here. And thank you very much, Olivier, that you are here with us today to give this here further insights, how to implement a circular economy for lithium-ion batteries. So the questions are, how can lithium-ion batteries keep in use as long as possible? How can they collect end-of-life batteries collected and treated? How to create a possibility for real closed loop recycling? How to constantly improve the recycling system, and also how to include environmental health and safety aspects in the recycling process itself. And so here we have identified the Kyburz from Switzerland as a very good practice example, our flagship case in the development of an effective system to collect, reuse, repurpose, and to recycling its own batteries. And when we look at their approach, Kyburz is using standardized lithium-ion batteries for their vehicles. They sell the vehicles to companies and private persons in Switzerland, but also around the world. But they don't only sell it, they also have in their approach, after around 7 years, to buy these vehicles back, including the batteries, and test the batteries. And then depending on the state of health, it can go into the reuse in another vehicle, the battery. The battery can go into another application to repurposing in a stationary storage, or it's going into the recycling process in their own recycling facility. And when the battery is going into the recycling facility, it's conducted by dismantling of the battery. So all data about the battery and the vehicle is available. The design for recycling can be implemented because they sell and buy it back and have to and recycle it. So there's a high recovery rate of materials possible, and also a direct recycling of the active materials could be possible and is investigated. And so there's a very high collection rate possible. The basis of this approach is a really close connection and communication between the company and the customers. And this is leading to several possibilities with this high collection rate. And so there is a high reuse rate. So only 1% of the batteries had to be recycled after the first lifetime, so after the first 7 years. And with today's available technology, a minimum of 91% by weight of batteries can be recycled. So this leads to really a decreasing primary raw material intensity of the batteries by creating this secondary material loop. And the recycling of the own cells enables deconstruction and direct recycling due to perfectly adapted processes, because they know what they sell and buy back, and it's going to the recycling process. And of course, the compliance with recycling regulations of both manufacturer and customer is ensured. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope I had the chance to give you a short input here. Unfortunately, I have to leave and cannot be at the panel, but if you have any question, please do not hesitate to get in contact with us, with me or the project team, and I try to get back to you and give you further information, and maybe we can have further discussion also in our roadmap consultation. Thank you very much.